The Courtroom Television Network presents Trial Story.
I was scared to death that if this guy got back up, he was going to take my gun away from me.
At some point, you have to look at that video and say, enough is enough.
Sometimes police work is brutal.
A beating by 4 Los Angeles police officers is captured on videotape. Was it a case of excessive force? From opening statements to the verdict. Now, the Rodney King case. What the jury saw in California versus Powell.
Officer Powell, you wanted him to get up, didn't you?
No, sir.
You wanted him to move towards you, didn't you?
No, that's not what
You
I
wanted to hit him in the head with a baton, didn't you?
No, sir.
This is a trial that sent protesters into the streets, demanding justice and, in some cases, revenge. A trial that seemed to be based on an 81-second videotape recorded on March 3rd, 1991 on a home video camera. Evidence that seemed so clear and convincing that the nation had already presumed guilt long before the jury reached its verdict.
All right, let's have quiet in the courtroom, please.
But the case wasn't decided in the streets. It was decided in this courtroom. The case is California versus Powell, Wynn, Brasino, and Kuhn, 4 Los Angeles police officers charged in the beating of motorist Rodney King. And despite the apparent simplicity of that one piece of videotape evidence, what happened here was anything but simple. In the next 2 hours, you'll have a chance to take a careful look at this case, to judge for yourself what happened that night, to judge whether any of the 4 defendants broke the law by beating Rodney King excessively and brutally. And after listening to testimony, as the jurors heard it in the courtroom, and to the instructions the judge gave the jury, you can judge for yourself how the jury reached its verdict. All 4 of the police officers charged are tried together. Officer Lawrence Powell, a 4-year veteran of the Los Angeles Police Department. Powell is seen on the video striking Rodney King over 45 times. He's charged with assault with a deadly weapon, excessive force by an officer, and with filing a false police report. Sergeant Stacy Kuhn, a 14-year veteran of the Los Angeles Police Department. Kuhn faces the most charges: assault with a deadly weapon, excessive force by an officer, filing a false police report, and trying to conceal the alleged crime. While Kuhn did not strike Rodney King with a baton, as the highest-ranking officer on the scene, prosecutors allege that he directed his officers to do so. Officer Timothy Wind, a rookie on the Los Angeles Police Department. Wind is seen on the video kicking and hitting King about 15 times, although the exact number is unclear. He is charged with assault with a deadly weapon and with excessive force by an officer. Finally, Officer Theodore Brasino, a 9-year veteran of the Los Angeles Police Department. Brasino is charged with assault with a deadly weapon and with excessive force by an officer. Prosecutors claim that Brasino kicked Rodney King. And it's the tape that prosecutors will use as the linchpin of their case.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Just to reintroduce myself, my name's Terry White. I'm a Deputy District Attorney for Los Angeles County. I'll be one of the prosecutors in this case.
In his opening statement, Chief Prosecutor Terry White sets a scene. He describes how the incident began after California Highway Patrol officers spotted King's car.
As Melanie Singer drove on the 210 freeway eastbound, as she approached the Sunland Boulevard exit, she noticed a vehicle in her rearview mirror which was approaching her vehicle at a very high rate of speed. This vehicle was driven by Rodney King.
Prosecutor White explains that several LAPD cars joined a high-speed pursuit. After a nearly 8-mile chase, Rodney King pulled over. White concedes up front that King disobeyed commands and resisted arrest.
Mr. King was being ordered to put his hands in view and to lie down on the ground. But Melanie Singer will testify he wasn't actually cooperating with that, at least not right away. She will tell you that Mr. King looked up at a helicopter which was circling the area and pointed at the helicopter and started smiling. All of this time, Los Angeles Police Department and CHP is ordering Mr. King down on the ground. Mr. King eventually did get down on the ground. He got down on the ground in a position where his arms were partially extended, his head was on the ground, and his entire body was on the ground, lying flat on his stomach. When he got into that position, Melanie Singer approached him to handcuff him, to place him under arrest. When she made her approach, defendant, Stacy Kuhn, said, "Stop, we'll handle this." At that time, Melanie Singer will testify that Officer Powell and another officer went to Rodney King grabbing a wrist. Officer Powell grabbed one wrist, another officer grabbed the other wrist. She'll testify that she believes that was some type of control move they were trying to place on Mr. King, but it was done in an ineffective manner. Mr. King slapped their hands away and stood up. At that point, Sergeant Stacy Kuhn told the officers to back away, that he was going to use a taser. Now, the taser is going to be explained in this particular trial, but it is a device in which they can shoot 50,000 volts of electricity through a person. In this particular instance, the taser apparently was not effective for whatever reason, and it's going to be explained to you during the trial, the reasons why it probably was not effective on that particular night. Now, after the taser became ineffective, Rodney King rose to his feet. And you're going to see that on the video when we play the video. As the video starts, Mr. King is lying flat on the ground. He then rises to his feet. He moves from left to right on the screen in the direction of Officer Powell. This could be viewed either as an attack of Officer Powell or running away from Officer Powell. By any interpretation, what Mr. Powell did next, you're going to see on the video, was unreasonable. Mr. Powell struck him a blow to the face with a baton. Much as a baseball batter would swing at a pitch, he swung that baton, hit Mr. Powell in the head. Melanie Singer will testify that the blow struck Mr. Powell in the head, causing the skin on his cheek to split, blood to spurt out. Mr. King goes down. Officer Powell then stands over him and delivers more blows to his head area. Also during the tape, you're going to see another officer, Defendant Brasino, appear to intercede to stop Officer Powell from continuing to strike Mr. King. You are later going to see in the video, however, that Officer Brasino, while Mr. King is on the ground, lying on his stomach, as his hands are moving back toward putting them behind his back, Officer Brasino walks over and delivers a stomp to the head and neck area of Mr. King. This evidence will show that whatever Rodney King was, or whatever he did, it did not justify what you saw on that videotape. Whatever he was and whatever he did, it did not allow Defendant Kuhn and Defendant Powell to write these false reports to cover up this incident. The evidence will show that when they wrote these false reports, I'm talking about Defendant Powell and Defendant Kuhn, when they wrote these reports, they knew they couldn't justify that beating that occurred 1 year ago. Ladies and gentlemen, they couldn't justify it 1 year ago, and no defendant in this courtroom will be able to justify it now. Thank you.
All right, Mr. Malger, you may proceed.
If it pleases the court, ladies and gentlemen of the jury. I hope you remember that my name is Darrell Munger, and I represent Sergeant Stacy Kuhn.
Sergeant Stacy Kuhn is the only defendant who is not accused of hitting or kicking King. But the state says that as the supervisor on the scene, he's responsible for all the actions of officers under his charge.
The evidence is going to show you that he's not in charge of this situation. There's only one person that's in charge of this situation, and that's Rodney Glenn King.
As a former LAPD officer himself, defense attorney Darrell Munger is in a good position to steer attention to the officers' perceptions of King. Although there never was any proof that King was on the powerful drug PCP, the officers say they thought he was.
That Rodney King displayed the objective symptoms of being under the influence of something. And Sergeant Kuhn will tell you, I knew he was under the influence of something. I saw a blank stare in his face. I saw watery eyes. I saw perspiration. I saw that he swayed. I saw that he was slow to follow the commands of the officers. I saw him looking through me. He will tell you he got his taser, and he told his 4 officers to take Rodney King down to the ground. You will hear that Larry Powell took one arm, Ted Brasino took another arm. Solano, the probationary employee that was working with Brasino, took one leg, and Wynn took the other leg. And while Rodney King was on all fours, Powell, 6'1", 193 pounds, Brasino on the other arm, 5'8", and only 135 pounds, pulled on his arms. Sergeant Kuhn observed muscle rigidity. Rodney King's arms weren't moving. But then for some reason, both arms came right out to the side. The evidence will show you that Rodney King went face down into the asphalt. You will see through still photographs and through the videotape, and you see it as the district attorney said many times, that Rodney King, without warning, with no one touching him, rose to his feet and turned within 2 seconds to the frame in a violent charge to Powell.
Munger unveils a defense strategy that recurs throughout the trial, looking at the videotape one frame at a time.
That when he starts to rise, Sergeant Kuhn believes, based upon observing his body actions, cocking his legs and drawing them up and pulling his arms in, that he's attempting to get back up to attack. And based upon that, he believed his actions, the actions of his officers, were reasonable.
While Sergeant Kuhn is facing the most charges, it is Officer Lawrence Powell who has the most difficult case. He is seen repeatedly hitting King. Powell's lawyer, Michael Stone, is also a former police officer.
Will be that Los Angeles police officers, like most other police officers in departments throughout the state, are trained in the escalation and de-escalation of force, and that as the suspects' movements and activities create an increase in the threat to the officer, or an increase in the resistance to arrest, or an increase in the attempt to escape, the officers are taught to escalate force. As the suspect becomes more compliant, or ceases the threat, or ceases the resistance, the officers are taught to de-escalate the force. And you'll hear testimony that practically every level except excessive force, every level of force was used in this case. Every level of force except deadly force.
Attorney Paul DePasquale is representing Officer Timothy Wynn. Although Wynn had been an officer in Kansas for 7 years, he had only 4 months' experience on the LAPD. DePasquale uses Wynn's inexperience as a defense.
It will not be the case that Tim Wynn had experience dealing with people under the influence of PCP. He had training, he had education. He had been informed and educated that in dealing with PCP suspects, in dealing with dusters, police officers have been killed. Tim Wynn dealt with the situation as it then unfolded in accordance with his training and with his experience.
DePasquale makes an argument that will be repeated by the defense throughout the trial, that the force used was proper under the policies of the LAPD.
Tim Wynn used the baton. He acted in accordance with his training. He stood and watched when Mr. King tried to rise. Tim Wynn moved in, used the strokes as per his training, and he backed up.
So far, the co-defendants have provided a unified defense, but the lawyer for Officer Ted Brasino changes that.
My client arrived at the scene where Mr. King was attempting to be put into custody, and he saw Mr. King charge at Officer Powell. He then saw Officer Powell take his baton and with a power stroke smash him right in the face. That's what I believe the evidence will show. I believe the evidence will further show that after that blow was struck, Officer Powell, in a torrent of blows, continued to hit Mr. King as Mr. King was on the ground and on his knees. He continued to hit him backwards and forwards in power strokes.
John Barnett claims that the one act his client is being prosecuted for, what appears to be a foot stomp to King's head, was actually intended to protect Rodney King.
What the evidence will show he is doing is not stomping, but attempting to place his foot down while keeping his head in an area where he can avoid being hit himself by one of these metal PR-24 batons.
A shared view of the defendant's actions already begins to emerge. But at the same time, so do the rifts in the defense. We'll have more about that later. But first, the prosecution will begin to present its witnesses when we return.
We believe the case is going to prove them guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. But we are not going into this particular case believing we have an open and shut case, because when you do that, you overlook things. You believe you can walk into court and everything's going to go your way, and no trial proceeds in that fashion.
How are you doing?
Prosecutor Terry White isn't taking anything for granted, despite that powerful piece of evidence against the 4 officers, the videotape. But if public reaction is any indication, he should be confident. Both President Bush and the mayor of Los Angeles condemn the violence seen on the tape. As its first witness, the prosecution calls the man who videotaped the beating.
My name is George William Holliday.
Without George Holliday, these 4 officers might not be on trial. Holliday says he was awakened by police sirens and helicopters, and he took out his new video camera to shoot the event. The full videotape, not just the short snippets aired on the news, is played in court. Parts of it, such as when King rushes at the officers, are blurred.
For the record, the time on the end of the tape on the screen now says 12:55 and 44 seconds.
Next, the state calls Bryant Allen, a friend of Rodney King, who was a passenger in King's car that night.
At that time, did you know somebody by the name of Rodney Glenn King?
Yeah.
How long had you known Mr. King?
No King, but all my youth life. About
How long?
my youth life, about 12 years.
Okay, can you speak up a little bit, maybe
Okay.
a little closer to that microphone? All right. And on the evening of March 2nd, 1991, did you see Mr. King?
Say that again.
All right. On the evening of March 2nd, 1991, did you and Mr. King get together?
Say March 91?
Yes.
March 3rd, 91, yeah.
Allen's testimony seems questionable in some respects, and he can't testify about the beating. He was on the ground, hands cuffed behind his back when King was beaten. On cross-examination, Allen is questioned about King's unusual behavior during the chase.
So you told Mr. King to pull over, and he didn't when you said it the first time, did he?
Right.
You thought he might have been in shock, didn't you?
Yeah.
What did you mean by shock?
Because he wasn't doing nothing. He just got stuck to whatever he was doing.
Well, you thought he was acting pretty strange, didn't you?
No, I know he was acting strange.
You started getting more and more and more worried the less and less Mr. King listened to you, correct?
Right. At one time I wanted to just jump out the car, but I didn't want to do that. Because I did think I'd done something.
Well, you thought he was acting kind of crazy, didn't you?
Huh?
You thought he was acting crazy, didn't you?
He was acting strange, yeah.
That observation may actually help the defense, underscoring its claim that the officers had reason to believe that King was on the drug PCP. Next comes the prosecution's star witnesses, the husband and wife team of Melanie and Tim Singer, the two California Highway Patrol officers who initiated the pursuit of Rodney King's car.
And as I reached the bottom of the hill, down on the bottom of Sunland itself, my vehicle was reading on the display at 115 and bouncing about 115 to 117 miles per hour.
Melanie Singer was the first officer to have contact with King at the scene. Singer describes him as initially uncooperative.
And what happened after he placed his hands on the roof of the car?
When he placed his hands on the roof of the car, the helicopter was overhead. He then looked like he was saying something inside the car, then pointed up at the helicopter itself and began to wave at the helicopter with his right hand. With his left hand still on the top of the roof of the car.
Was he still smiling?
Yes, sir, he was waving and smiling.
Now, was he smiling or was he laughing? What was he doing?
It appeared to be smiling. I didn't hear any chuckles or any outward bursts.
And what happened next?
After he had began to wave at the helicopter, my partner yelled at him, "I told you to get back from the car, get your hands where I can see him, get yourself on the ground."
Now, other than your partner, officer, who was issuing commands, had any other officer issued any other commands to the driver?
No, sir.
What happened next?
When he moved away from the car, he dropped both of his arms away from the car, down to his sides, and turned his body almost in a north direction, away to where his left side was now facing me, to where I could not see his right hand. At that time, I withdrew my weapon, pointed it at the suspect, or the driver, told him to get his hands away from his butt. I could not see where his hand was. And at that time, he turned his complete body around to where his rear end was facing me. He grabbed his right buttock with his right hand and shook it at me.
Singer says she approached King with her gun drawn, but LAPD Sergeant Stacy Kuhn stepped in and told her he and the LAPD were taking charge of the situation. She says that's when Kuhn shot King twice with an electric shotgun called a taser.
Then Officer Powell came up to the right of him. In a matter of seconds, he took out his baton. He had it in a power swing, and he struck the driver right across the top of the cheekbone, splitting his face from the top of his ear to his chin.
Prior to Officer Powell hitting him with the baton, did anyone give the driver any type of commands after this second taser shot that you described?
No, sir.
Was there any reason, or was there any reason for the strike to the head by Officer Powell at the time he struck him?
In my opinion, no, sir. There was no reason for it.
Melanie Singer demonstrates the blow she says she saw Lawrence Powell deliver.
Cross-examination of Mr.
On cross-examination, Officer Powell's attorney, Michael Stone, tries to cast doubt on Singer's observations. Stone grills Singer about the apparent inconsistency between the blows Singer says she saw and the injuries sustained by Rodney King.
Well, you described in your earlier testimony, and then you just reiterated that the skin was split from the ear to the chin. Is that right?
I'm going to object. That misstates the evidence.
She just said yes.
Objection overruled.
And does that appear to be sutured in that photograph?
Pardon me, sir?
Does that appear to be sutured in that photograph?
No, sir.
Does it appear to be split in that photograph from the ear to the chin?
No, sir.
Do you have any explanation for that?
I saw what I saw, sir.
Thank you.
Patrol Officer Tim Singer, partner and husband of Melanie Singer, takes the stand. He identifies the defendant, Lawrence Powell.
This is referring to Mr. Powell.
Where did Mr. Powell strike Mr. King with the baton?
The right side of his head, above the ear.
What happened then?
Mr. King continued towards me, and Officer Powell delivered another blow. The thought came through my mind, how can he do this?
When you mean he, who are you referring to?
Officer Powell.
And what was Mr. Powell doing that you were referring to?
Striking Mr. King in the head.
And what was it about this, or what did you think about this?
Well, I knew it was against CHP policy to strike someone in the head, and it could, results could be deadly. So I just knew it was wrong. So that's exactly what went through my mind. How can he be doing this?
All right. Thank you very much, sir. I have nothing further, Your Honor.
While the Singers are the only two eyewitness officers that the prosecution could produce to testify for the state, they do help establish its central premise, that the juror should literally believe their eyes and let the video speak for itself. Now the prosecution must convince the jury that what's on the tape is criminal. The strategy emerges when we come back. The prosecution has presented its eyewitnesses, and now it turns to another element of its case, the state of mind of the defendants, focusing on evidence that reveals the attitudes and therefore motivations and intent of the officers on the night of the beating. To do this, the state calls a series of witnesses.
My name is Carol Denise Edwards.
Nurse Carol Denise Edwards treated Rodney King in the emergency room. She's the first of two nurses to testify about a conversation overheard between King and Lawrence Powell.
During the course of conversation, Mr. Powell had said to Mr. King, "We played a little ball tonight too, didn't we?" And Mr. King replied, "I don't know," or "I don't know what you mean." And then Mr. Powell said, "We played a little hardball tonight. Do you remember who was playing?" And Mr. King said something to the effect, "I guess so." And Mr. Powell said, "We won and you lost," or something to that effect.
My name's Lawrence Ernest Davis.
Nurse Lawrence Davis was also in the emergency room that night.
What did Officer Powell say?
Officer Powell says it's a good thing that I'm not going to the game. I wouldn't want you to be my usher.
And what did Mr. King say to that?
Nothing.
And did Officer Powell then say anything else?
Later on in the conversation, later as I was doing my assessment, Officer Powell made a comment that he asked Rodney if he remembered that.
He asked who?
Rodney King.
Okay, please refer to him by his proper name.
Okay. He asked Mr. King if he remembered the game that they played that night, referring to themselves, the police officers.
What exactly did he say?
He asked, "Did you see the game we played tonight?"
And he was directed that comment toward Mr. King?
Yes, sir.
And what did Mr. King say?
Mr. King said, I don't recall, I don't know what you're talking about.
And what did Mr. Powell say to that?
He said, "Oh, come on, don't you remember? You know, we had a pretty good hardball game tonight."
And what did Mr. King say to that?
Mr. King just, he didn't realize what they were talking about.
Mr. King did not reply to that?
Not then, no.
And did Mr. Powell say something else?
Yeah, he says, don't you remember that hardball game? We hit quite a few home runs. And then Mr. King, it dawned on him who they were talking about, and Mr. King said, oh, yes, I remember. You guys did have a pretty good ball game tonight.
The prosecution introduces more so-called state-of-mind evidence against Lawrence Powell. Messages sent by Powell to a colleague on a mini-computer in his police car just after the incident.
What message was sent to 16A23?
The message that was sent to 16A23 was, oops, what?
Then at 1:13 and 53 seconds in the morning, Unit 16A23 sent a message back to Unit 16FB9. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
And what was that message?
The message states, I haven't beaten anyone this bad in a long time.
The state's strategy is to portray Powell as a person who knew what he had done, knew it was wrong, and didn't care. Next, an audio tape of Powell's radio call for an ambulance.
Victim of
Powell's reference to King's injuries as numerous head wounds and his laughter afterwards is introduced as evidence of Powell's inappropriate behavior. Now the prosecution turns to the state of mind of Sergeant Kuhn. A police car computer message was sent by Sergeant Kuhn to headquarters just after the incident.
The message that was sent to the ACC states, you, and that happens to be unit. Just had a big-time use of force, tased and beat the suspect of a CH pursuit big time.
Prosecutors argue that when Sergeant Kuhn stated that Rodney King was beat and tased in a big-time use of force, Kuhn was admitting that the use of force was excessive. Without addressing the state of mind of the other two defendants, the prosecution turns to a last important aspect of its case, the medical condition of Rodney King after the beating. Dr. Antonio Mancia treated King in the emergency room. Dr. Mancia testified that King required a total of 20 stitches.
My name is David Gianetto. Last name is spelled
The prosecution calls a second doctor to confirm Dr. Mancia's testimony.
Let's start with the head and the face. Did you notice any injuries in that area?
Yes, I know some lacerations that had been sutured already, which I had indicated here over his right cheek, his right forehead, over the angle of his mouth on the right side. On his face, he had a fracture of what we call the zygomatic arch on the right side of his face. Also on some facial x-rays, he had some what we call an air fluid level in his right maxillary sinus. He had multiple areas of bruising over both the upper and lower part of his back and the upper part, especially the right part of his chest, and the right upper aspect of the arm. A non-displaced fracture of the fibula, which is the smaller of the two bones in the leg.
When you say a fracture, what do you mean?
Broken.
Under cross-examination, Dr. Gianetto could not say if baton blows caused the injuries.
Can you tell the jury anything about how Mr. King sustained the injury from the appearance of the suturing?
No.
Prosecutors hope that this medical evidence, plus the testimony from officers Melanie and Tim Singer, and the so-called state-of-mind evidence, and of course the videotape, will convince the jurors that the defendants crossed over the line from acceptable force to police brutality. The prosecution rests its case with little evidence presented about two of the defendants, officers Timothy Wind and Theodore Briceño. And there is one particularly glaring omission. The one witness jurors probably most expected to see, the victim himself, Rodney King, has not been called to the stand. The state defends its decision.
There isn't any way Rodney King, with all these blows raining down on his head, could have told the story as clearly and as coherently as that videotape. So Rodney King would not have added any facts to the case. He simply would have been up there as a target, the target of the defense attorneys to beat up on him and try to get the jury to look in a different direction than at the facts of the case. I guess you could sort of sum it up this way. These officers, these 4 defendants, beat up on Rodney King, and we weren't going to give their attorneys the opportunity to beat up on him in court.
It was a serious tactical decision for the prosecutor not to call him. How many cases have you seen where there's not a homicide, where they don't call the victim? And I'm sure the jury would have liked to have heard from Rodney King. Whether or not the absence of Rodney King is a great score for us or not, I don't know. We'll have to wait and see.
This is the Los Angeles County Courthouse. This is where the case would have been tried had the defendants not scored an early success. That success was getting the trial moved here, to this Ventura County Courthouse. This move, made months before the trial started, was as important as anything the defense would do during the trial. The move is called a change of venue. In this case, a California appeals court ruled in favor of the defendants, who argued they could not get a fair trial in Los Angeles because of the intense local political controversy surrounding the highly publicized case. Judge Stanley Weisberg picked the LA suburb of Simi Valley, a convenient location, but nevertheless a controversial one. In LA County, 64% of the population is non-white. In Ventura County, it's only 34%. Of the 12 jurors picked in this trial, not one is an African American. The question observers pose is whether a jury from this predominantly white community can fairly judge 4 officers accused of beating a black man. With the venue change already working in its favor, the defense opens its case. Defense attorney Munger leads off. He ends earlier speculation as to whether the defendants would testify in their own defense.
My name is Stacy Cornell Kuhn. First name Stacy, S-T-A-C as Charles.
Kuhn, a 14-year police veteran, is accused by the state of supervising the beating of Rodney King.
And you said that you observed him to be buffed out. Would you please describe to the jury what buffed out means to you?
Buffed out is jargon that I've come to associate with very muscular. In other words, an individual that is very pumped up as far as muscles.
And does that have some significance to you?
Yes, it does.
And what is that significance?
That question regarding
The buffed out. Yes, Your Honor. With regard to your state of mind, what were you thinking when you saw this buffed out person?
My initial response is that he was probably an ex-con. The CHP officer, Melanie Singer, began approaching the suspect with a gun in hand.
And how close did she get to Mr. King?
I'd approximate about, from your distance to the edge of the jury box there, about 5-6 feet.
And did you say anything to Officer Singer?
Yes, sir, I did.
And what was that?
I ordered her to stay back.
And why was that, sir?
Because she was injecting a gun into the situation, and my tactical training had led me to believe that you don't approach suspects that are not controlled with a gun.
Kuhn describes how officers tried but could not restrain King.
The next thing I saw is Officer Powell is thrown off of Mr. King, and Officer Brasino is struggling to get away.
All right, when you say thrown off, can you describe for the jury what you mean by thrown off, what position he was in?
Well, Mr. King's left arm was behind him, and Officer Powell was on his back. And Officer Brasino was trying to force the arm up to meet so that the wrist would match behind the cuff. And all of a sudden, Mr. King's arm just came out from him. And then he swayed to the left, swayed to the right, and Officer Powell was thrown off, and Officer Brasino kind of landed on his behind. I ordered him to back off, and then I tased the suspect, Mr. King.
All right, did you say anything to him before you tased him?
Yes, sir, I did.
What did you say to him?
He was on the rise, and I ordered him to get down, to lay down.
All right, tell the jury what you mean by on the rise, sir.
He had initially gone out flat, and after the rolling motion, he had kind of come up to his left side, and his torso was off the ground, and his legs were cocked, and he was attempting, in my opinion, to rise off the ground.
And did you say anything to him?
Yes, I told him, I ordered him to lay down, to get down.
And did you say this in a normal tone?
No, I shouted it at him. I advised him, or told him that if he didn't get down, I was going to tase him.
All right. And did he stay down?
No, he did not.
What did he do?
He continued to rise.
And what did you do?
I tased him.
Did you see any physical movements of Mr. King?
No, he grimaced. He kind of gave out like a bear-like yell.
And what did he do then?
He continued to rise. He got up to his knees, and he began to turn 180 degrees toward me then.
And what happened then?
I ordered him again to lay down, to get down.
And what did he do?
He continued to rise. He came up, he continued to rise to his feet, and I tased him a second time.
And what did he do after you tased him the second time?
He repeated this groan, similar to like a wounded animal, and then I could see the vibrations on him, but he seemed to be overcoming it.
Sergeant Kuhn then establishes what will become a major theme, the officer's fear of Rodney King.
I thought that the suspect was under the influence of PCP. PCP is a dangerous drug. It's kind of like a policeman's nightmare, that the individual that's under this is super strong. They have more or less a one-track mind. They exhibit super strength, and they equate it with a monster is what they equate it with.
While both the defense and the prosecution agreed in court that Rodney King was legally drunk, there was no evidence of PCP use. But Sergeant Kuhn says it's what he thought that matters.
You see the officers giving a torrent of blows to his body?
Yes, to his arms, to his torso, to his legs.
All right, have you given any specific direction to Mr. King at this time?
I've been yelling at him to get down, to stay down at this time.
All right, and has he gotten down, sir?
No, sir, he continues to rise.
And what are you thinking now, sir?
I'm getting concerned, scared. I'm getting a little frightened here now because this gentleman has just been subjected to a multitude of blows with the metal PR-24, and there is no evidence that he's going to go into compliance mode.
As Kuhn testifies, it becomes increasingly apparent that the defense is trying to use the tape for its own advantage.
Sergeant Kuhn, at this point in time, this incident has just gone on several seconds, is that correct?
It's gone on, it seems like an attorney, but it's gone on several seconds, yes.
All right, and Mr. King has been hit several times?
He's been hit a lot of times.
And at this point, do you believe he's trying to get up?
Yes, I do.
And what did you think he was trying to get up to do?
That he was going to get up and arm himself and possibly attack Officer Wind here in the background, Officer Powell, Officer Brasino.
During this entire incident, do you believe that you were in charge of your officers?
Yes, I was in charge of my officers.
Do you believe that your officers did anything improper?
Objection, irrelevant. Overruled. You can answer the question.
No, this was a managed and controlled use of force. It followed the policies and procedures of the Los Angeles Police Department and the training.
How do you view looking at this videotape, sir?
Objection, irrelevant. Overruled. You can answer the question.
It's violent and it's brutal.
Was this anything that you enjoyed?
No.
Why was it done?
It's done to control an aggressive combative suspect, and sometimes police work is brutal. That's just a fact of life.
Your Honor, I have no questions.
Mr. Stone?
I have no questions.
Mr. DePasquale?
No questions, Your Honor.
All right. Mr.
None of the other defense lawyers cross-examined Sergeant Kuhn, a show of apparent unity. But on cross-examination, Prosecutor Alan Yokelson tries to chip away at his testimony.
So you felt that you were responsible for directing the actions of all of the officers at the scene, is that right?
Yes, sir.
And therefore you would have responsibility for the actions of the officers at the scene, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
And when you gave directions to the Los Angeles police officers there, you take responsibility for all of their actions, correct?
Yes, sir. I take accountability and responsibility for all the actions.
Those who were within the law and those were without, that are outside the law, is that correct?
Objection assumes facts not in evidence.
It's argumentative. Objection sustained.
When is deadly force authorized by Los Angeles Police Department?
I'm not sure what you mean by when it's authorized.
When can you shoot somebody under LAPD policy?
When they're an imminent threat to you.
What kind of threat?
Deadly threat to you. They have to pose a deadly threat to you.
In other words, they have to be in a position to kill you.
That's correct, sir.
And what was Mr. King doing here that led you to believe that he was going to kill you or kill somebody?
It was my belief and my perception. He was under the influence of PCP. If he had grabbed my officer, it would have been a death grip. If he had grabbed the weapon, he would have had numerous targets, sir.
He didn't grab anybody during these events, did he?
No, sir, he did not.
He didn't kick anybody during these events, did he?
No, sir, he did not.
Is it your testimony that you were approaching the point where deadly force was going to be required?
Yes, sir, it is.
And your option would have been to shoot him?
To choke or to shoot, sir.
But because of what you've just spoken about with respect to the chokehold, your only option left would have been to shoot him, is that right?
No, sir, I personally would have applied a chokehold to Mr. King prior to ordering him to be shot.
So you would have gone in and used this chokehold, is that right?
I personally, no, I would not have delegated that to any officer. I personally would have done that.
The questions turn to the baton blows.
Is it your testimony that every one of these blows depicted on this videotape is a justified use of force within the meaning of the policy of the Los Angeles Police Department?
I can't honestly say that I saw every one of those blows that was on the videotape.
In watching the videotape now, is it your testimony that every one of the blows that you see on there is a justified use of force?
It's a reasonable and necessary using the minimum force. Yes, sir, that is my testimony.
In all your years of experience, Sergeant, have you ever seen a worse beating applied by officers of the Los Angeles Police Department?
I've seen uses of forces of considerable violence, but I have not seen anything as violent as this in my 14 and a half years. No, sir.
It appears that the prosecution has made little headway. Coon stands by the actions of the officers on duty that night. To bolster Coon's version of events, the defense calls an expert.
Charles L. Duke, Jr., D-U-K-E.
Duke, a veteran of more than 20 years with the Los Angeles Police Department, helps establish a key defense strategy to turn the videotape to its own advantage. Duke meticulously dissects the tape, identifying the blows and kicks as direct reactions to aggressive movements by Rodney King.
What did Mr. King do based upon your perception?
Mr. King came from a outstretched prone position, raised up and turned and what appeared to run or charge at an officer.
All right, sir. And in this particular set of circumstances, is a baton an appropriate weapon to use to stop that advance or escape?
Yes, it is.
When he is in this position here at 336.19, would it be appropriate to hit Mr. King with a baton?
He's in a rising position. He has this leg is cocked. He's up on his knees or up on his elbows in a rising position.
All right, so you're saying based upon all that has happened up to date with regard to this scenario, you think it would be appropriate to hit him?
Yes, I do, because once an officer is attacked, to allow the suspect to rise to his feet, you allow the potential for escalating the situation into a deadly force mode. The suspect has his hand in a flat, the hand portion of the hand is flat on the ground. The arm appears to be cocked. This leg, which would be his left leg, appears to be bent, coming up in a position in he is in a what appears to be a rocking position because of the bent leg here, and the arm flat on the ground in a pushing position.
Assuming that an individual perceived him to be attempting to rise, would it be appropriate within the policy and procedure to strike that individual?
Yes, it would.
Prosecutor Terry White challenges Duke's conclusions.
Sergeant Duke, when you first saw this videotape, you were shocked by what you saw, weren't you?
I wasn't shocked, no.
When you first saw this videotape, did you believe that it possibly contained excessive force by these officers?
I never form an opinion until I get all the facts.
Sergeant Duke, when you first looked at this videotape, did you possibly believe that it contained excessive force? Yes or no?
I'd have to say no.
White turns to the tape itself.
Stopping the video at 3:51:02. Mr. King is again on his knees, his upper body raised off the ground. Is that correct?
That's correct.
All right. Now, in this particular sequence that we've just seen, from the point in time where it was started until now where it stopped at 3:51:02, have you seen Mr. King swing at anyone?
No, I haven't.
Have you seen him punch at anyone?
No, I haven't.
Okay. His only movement is up to raising off the ground. Is that correct?
Right, on the spectrum of the first incident that you referred to, he is in that spectrum of aggression.
Which would again allow the continued use of the baton.
That's correct.
This is still an aggressive position in your mind. Is that correct?
Yes, according to your spectrum, it is, yes.
Well, according to your perception, it's an aggressive position.
Yes, on the guide of your spectrum, yes, it's both.
All right. Still aggressive enough in your mind to justify the continued use of this deadly weapon?
Yes.
What movement have you seen by Mr. King at this time?
He had his knee in a cocked position, and a baton blow struck, and it straightened it out.
The baton blow straightened out his leg?
It caused him to move his leg straight, in a straight position.
What do you think it caused it to move it in that straight position from pain?
I don't know.
Does Mr. King need to be unconscious for you to say he's not aggressive?
No.
The prosecution has failed to shake Duke from his position that every blow delivered to Rodney King was specifically provoked by him. The defense hopes that this will be enough to create reasonable doubt about the defendant's guilt.
Grand jury transcripts, all the witnesses, the analysis of all the witness statements, everything.
Defense lawyer Michael Stone has pages and pages of court documents in his trunk.
Jeez, I have no idea. It must be 25,000.
As Lawrence Powell's lawyer, he knows he has a tough moment ahead. His client will soon take the stand. But first, the defense has plans to reinforce a key element of its case.
With the expert testimony of Sergeant Duke, an extraordinary process has begun. The defense lawyers are converting the prosecution's best evidence, the videotape, into their own defense weapon. It's a technique that the next expert witness fine-tunes. Former LAPD Captain Robert Michael.
There were 10 distinct uses of force rather than one single use of force. In each of those uses of force, there was an escalation and a de-escalation, an assessment period, and then an escalation and a de-escalation again, and another assessment period.
Captain Michael says the officers were following the rules, escalating and de-escalating force in response to the suspect's behavior.
Excuse me, for the record, which was 40216. 40501, we see a blow being delivered, is that correct?
That's correct. The force has been again escalated to the level it had been previously, and the de-escalation has ceased.
Okay.
And
at this point, which is, for the record, 41329, we see a blow being struck and thus the end of the period of de-escalation, is that correct, Captain?
that's correct. Force has now been elevated to the previous level after this period of de-escalation.
Captain Michael considers that blow and all of the blows that can be seen on the tape to be justified.
On cross-examination, Prosecutor Terry White tries to discredit the defense's analysis of the tape.
Stopping the video at 3:55:20. Let's assume that an individual has fallen to the ground and is not making any resistive movements. Would you consider that proper escalation to continue to hit an individual with a baton?
Yes.
Even though the individual is not making any resistive movements?
Yes.
Prosecutor Terry White says Rodney King was not really resisting, but he is unable to shake Captain Michael from his conclusion. But it's the next witness who is the most anticipated one to take the stand in this trial.
Lawrence Michael Powell.
Lawrence Powell has the most to explain. He is seen hitting Rodney King over 45 times. Powell testifies about when he and his partner, defendant Timothy Wynn, joined in the chase after Rodney King's car.
I looked in to see how many occupants there were and could count 3 and saw the driver and the passenger looking back at us at one point.
All right, when you say looking back, were they continuously looking back?
At different times. It wasn't all 3 turned their heads at the same time, but the passenger looked back. I saw the driver look back at a time. I saw the passenger look back another time, and the driver, all their heads were going like little dolls. That indicated to me that they knew we were there, and that the police were behind them with lights and siren going.
Powell testifies about the first moments when he saw King.
I saw the blank stare, the slow, stiff movements, and he wasn't complying with the verbal commands, and I could see sweat glistening on his face.
Did his conduct did his conduct figure into your evaluation?
Yes, it did.
And in what way?
And I was scared that this guy was under PCP.
In your mind, was it safe to approach him at that point?
No.
Why did you approach him at that point?
Sergeant Kuhn told me to. I walked up to the left side of Mr. King and reached down and grabbed his left wrist and placed my right hand just behind his neck on his back and tried to pull the arm out from underneath him.
What was your reason for doing that?
I wanted him to be laying on the ground so I could handcuff him. Mr. King took his arms and broke them free of my grasp and the other officer's grasp, put him down on the ground in a push-up position, raised up his torso, and knocked me off, and I fell backwards and landed on my rear.
When this happened, did that concern you?
Yes.
Why?
Well, I had all my body weight on top of this guy, and in a matter of a second, he had done a push-up and had knocked me off and wasn't complying with the handcuffing. He was resisting.
Right.
He was
And
fighting.
As you were struggling or tugging on his arms, were you assessing anything?
Yes, he had great strength and resistance in his arms.
And you could feel that?
I could feel it and I could see. He had very powerful arms. This was a big man.
Was there ever a time when you stood facing Mr. King, both of you on your feet, where he is flailing his arms and you're swinging a baton in a forward and reverse power stroke at his shoulders?
No.
Was there ever a time when you were in those same relative positions and you swung your baton in forward and reverse power strokes and struck Mr. King in the jaw or face?
No.
Tell the jury what you remember about that charge.
Just remember, just real fast, I had no time to react. It was practically a head-on collision where I had to step aside and I had my baton out, but I wasn't able to swing it and get in a swing.
Let's stop there. Now, when you say it was almost a head-on collision, describe for the jury in more detail which direction Mr. King was coming toward you, if that was the case, and how you were facing him, if you were.
Yes, he was coming straight towards me, and I was facing directly at him.
All right. And what was the position of his arms?
His arms were up in a manner like this, about shoulder height with his hands out.
You've described his arms extending out from his body, his hands open?
Right.
Okay. And as he came toward you, was he moving slowly or fast?
Very quickly.
And tell the jury what you did in response to that.
I didn't have time to react. I was starting to swing, but it was more like a checked swing when he collided into me.
All right, after the collision, and did Mr. King continue to go in the direction that he was going?
Yes.
And were you able to watch him?
Yes.
And Just describe what you saw.
It was like a rag doll, his no muscles, just everything quit, and his face, he just went in a straight crashing position and landed on his face.
What did you see next?
I saw his head bounce back up, and then his arms came in underneath him, and he went into a push-up position again, raising his torso off the ground and bringing his legs in.
And what did you do then?
I hit him with the power stroke on his right arm and yelled at him to get down on the ground.
All right. Now, why did you do that?
Because I didn't want him to get back up again.
Why not?
Because he's a danger. He charged me once, he attacked me twice. I've already been attacked, and he's getting up again.
Did you strike Mr. King for the purpose of punishing him?
No.
Did you strike Mr. King for the purpose of hurting him?
No, not for the purpose of hurting him.
All right. Did you strike Mr. King in anger?
No.
Describe your mental state at the time you were striking him.
Objection irrelevant. Overruled.
I was completely in fear for my life, scared to death that if this guy got back up, he was going to take my gun away from me, or there was going to be a shooting, and I was doing everything I could to keep him down on the ground.
Powell denies a prosecution claim that he taunted Rodney King in the emergency room.
Ask this. Did you yourself say anything about hitting home runs?
No.
Did you say anything about playing baseball?
No.
About hardball?
No.
Did you have any conversations like that at all with Mr. King?
Just the usher comment.
So the answer is?
No.
All right. Did you have any conversations with any other officer in that immediate area about any of those things that I mentioned?
No.
Under questioning by his lawyer, Powell has denied the prosecutor's allegations and has reinforced the same story Sergeant Stacy Kuhn told from the stand, that the force used was justified. But on cross-examination, Prosecutor Terry White focuses on Powell's possible motivations.
When you type something into the MDT, do you think about it before you type it?
Usually, yes.
All right. Usually, you think about what you want to type, and then you type the word in. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Your fingers just don't go over that keyboard or the typing board involuntarily, do they?
No.
Your mind works before your fingers start working. Is that correct?
Yes.
White asks about a police computer message Powell sent just before the incident.
You replied to her, "Sounds almost as exciting as our last call. It was right out of Gorillas in the Mist." And that's what you typed into her, isn't it?
Yes.
And she typed back, "Ha ha ha ha. Let me guess who be the parties." You remember that, don't you?
Yes.
And then you typed in a message to her about trying to get through the night and that you were off for 6 days and it was time for some serious bike riding. Then you typed in, "Good guess," didn't you?
I believe so.
Now this incident that you're referring to, this last call right out of Gorillas in the Mist, it involved a family of African Americans, didn't it?
Yes, did.
All right. And in your description of these individuals, you called them gorillas, didn't you?
No.
Okay. Now, this call that involved these African Americans, was it in a jungle?
In a what?
A jungle.
No.
Was it at the zoo?
No.
Were there any gorillas around?
I didn't see any.
This is the movie Gorillas in the Mist, is that correct?
Yes.
Was there any wildlife around at all during this call?
Not that I saw.
All right. Other than just these individuals who were African Americans, is that correct?
No, I wouldn't call them wildlife.
But you referred to that call as right out of Gorillas in the Mist.
Yes.
There were no gorillas there, were there?
No, I didn't see any.
Was that movie playing on their TV when you were there?
I didn't go inside their house.
Okay. Did you see anything regarding Gorillas in the Mist while you were at that location?
Did I see anything?
Yes.
No.
Again, trying to discredit Powell, the prosecutor turns to the computer message sent after the incident.
Officer Powell, you used excessive force when you beat Rodney King, didn't you?
No, sir.
Officer Powell, you used inappropriate conduct in that incident with Rodney King, didn't you?
No, sir.
Why did you tell Karina Smith, I haven't beaten anyone this bad in a long time? Why did you use the word beaten?
That's a common police jargon when you talk from policeman to policeman, kind of a professional jargon.
Professional jargon?
Yeah.
So you go up to someone and say, how many people did you beat today?
I don't do that, no.
But you did it here.
No, I didn't do that.
Well, you used the word beaten.
Yes, I did use the word beaten.
Well, beat and beaten, the same thing, isn't it?
What do you mean, the same thing?
Same word.
Oh, form of the same word, sure.
All right. And that's professional police jargon in your mind?
No, it's jargon used in the police profession.
At any time during this evening, did it go through your mind that this was not a human being that you were beating?
No.
All right. Mr. King is a human being, right?
Yes, sir.
He should be treated like a human being.
Yes, sir.
All right. Even though he is a suspect and even though he is suspected of committing a crime, this man is still a human being, isn't he?
Yes, sir.
He deserves to be treated like a human being, didn't he?
Yes, sir.
He wasn't an animal, was he?
No, sir, just
He wasn't-
acting like one.
He wasn't. He was just acting like one.
Yes, sir.
Was he acting like a gorilla?
No, sir.
Okay. But he was acting like one because of the sounds he was making.
No, sir, because of his uncontrollable behavior.
You allowed this man, who you considered a threat, to get up off the ground and move towards you, didn't you?
I didn't allow him, he did that.
Okay. You allowed him to get up, didn't you?
I had no control, he did it.
Were you standing near him when he started to get up?
Not close enough to stop him.
Not close enough to stop him.
That's correct.
Were your feet frozen?
Were my feet frozen? Oh, no, wasn't that cold?
Were your feet cemented in the ground?
No, sir.
You could have, as he attempted to get up, you could have moved toward him, couldn't you?
Yes.
Okay. You could have moved toward him and struck him to keep him on the ground.
Not in this situation. I couldn't have. I didn't have time.
Officer Powell, you wanted him to get up, didn't you?
No, sir.
You wanted him to move towards you, didn't you?
No, that's not what
You
I
wanted to hit him in the head with a baton, didn't you?
No, sir.
On the stand for hours, Powell has stuck to his version of events. Ultimately, the question comes down to credibility. Will the jury believe his story enough to cast a reasonable doubt on the accusations against him? It's week 5 of the trial, and there's a major surprise.
Good morning, Tim.
Hi.
Defendant Timothy Wynn decides he will not testify. Just 2 days earlier, Wynn's attorney, Paul DePasquale, had announced that he would. Meanwhile, the defense case proceeds. Of the 21 officers who were witnesses to the beating, the prosecution could only produce officers Melanie and Tim Singer to testify against the defendants. But the defense is able to produce a parade of officers who were at the scene, all willing to testify on behalf of their fellow officers. In all, 9 officers are called to counter what the prosecutors say the videotape shows.
Mr. King was a very big person, and I had formed the opinion in my mind that he was under the influence of PCP.
He was pushing his upper body off the ground. He was getting struck in the legs with the baton, and I mean,
Just describe it.
okay, and it was having no effect on him.
Was the blow that you saw delivered consistent with the training that you had received by the Los Angeles Police Department?
Yes, sir.
On cross-examination, Prosecutor White tries to show that the testimony of the 9 officers is a result of the police code of silence.
Where did you eat lunch yesterday?
In the waiting area for the officers,
All
the
right.
witnesses.
All right, you ate lunch in the defendant's offices upstairs, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
You didn't pay for that lunch, did you?
No, sir.
All right. And also, you weren't the only other former Foothill officer up in the defendant's offices yesterday, were you?
No, sir.
There were other officers up there also, is that correct?
Yes.
Officer Hayduke was up there?
Yes.
Officer Sempak was up there?
Yes.
Whether the near-unanimous voice of these officers was the code of silence in action, or whether they were simply telling the truth, is a matter for the jury. But the next witness to take the stand will only add to the contradictions. He's the fourth defendant, Officer Theodore Briceño. Of the four officers on trial, Briceño's case is the easiest to defend. He is charged with assault for only one act documented on the tape, the alleged stomp to King's head and neck area.
Officer Briceño, how old are you?
39,
And on March 3rd, 1991, what was your occupation?
Los Angeles police officer,
As of that date, how long had you been a Los Angeles police officer?
9 years.
At first, Briceño's testimony supports the testimony of the other defendants, portraying King as combative and unusually strong.
Mr. King came up into a kneeling position like this, hitting me in the chest, causing me to fall, landing in like a backwards crab position, I would call it.
Indicating you, when you gave that description, you moved both of your arms straight back and behind you?
Straight back.
All right. And so you lost control of Mr. King at that point?
Yes, sir. I thought Mr. King was under the influence of probably PCP.
And what was that based on?
From when I saw him get out of the car, from his walk, his stare, when I grabbed a hold of him, he was sweaty, and the fact that he was been shot by a taser and didn't go down.
But soon Briceño's lawyer, John Barnett, reveals his strategy. He pits his client against the other officers.
Now, you saw forward and reverse strokes. Did you see the area where these baton blows were striking?
Yes.
And where was that?
It appeared to be from the shoulder up.
All right. Now, at that point, what were you thinking? At the point where these power and reverse strokes were being delivered, what were you thinking?
I was thinking that he was delivering them to the head.
All right. Can you say for certain whether or not the baton hit the head, or was it in, sir?
No, sir.
In your mind, was it in the area of the head?
Yes, sir.
And I'm going to stop at 3:40:23. Do you see yourself in that picture?
Yes, sir.
And where are you?
4 and 5. From D to H.
All right. And what are you doing?
This is when I stopping Officer Powell.
All right. Are you stopping Officer? Why are you stopping Officer Powell?
Because what I recall was I didn't see Mr. King moving, and I thought Officer Powell was out of control then.
And so what are you trying to do?
Stop Officer Powell. Like I was telling you, I didn't understand what was going on out there. I just didn't understand it. It didn't make any sense to me. I couldn't see why they were doing what they were doing.
What do you mean doing what they were doing?
It was like he moved. They hit him. I couldn't see it. I didn't understand it. I couldn't understand. I was trying to look at and view what they were looking at, and I couldn't see it. I thought, I understood a lot of things that night, but I'm thinking evidently they saw something I didn't see.
But Briceño needs to explain his one seemingly violent act on the tape, the alleged stomp.
And I've stopped it right at 4:28:18. Now, is this when you have contact with Mr. King?
Yes, sir.
And where is that contact?
It would be...
Well, tell me from that evening.
From
Where
that
was it on
evening,
his body?
it was on his left shoulder.
All right. Now, are you trying to hurt Mr. King at all?
No, sir.
Are you trying to punish him in any way?
No, sir.
All right. Have you? What do you hope to accomplish by putting your foot in that position?
Well, I'm hoping he's going to stop and the officers will back away.
You're hoping that Mr. King is going to stop moving completely?
Yes, sir.
And then you'll be in between Mr. King and the officers?
Yes, sir.
And then what are you going to do?
Drop down and hopefully I could cuff him.
Could you describe what your mental state was at that time?
I was very angry, very upset, very frustrated.
Well, why were you angry and frustrated and upset?
Of the incident that I just saw.
Well, what did you tell your probationer?
Well, I was taking my anger and my frustrations out on my probationer because I was upset with Sergeant.
All right, well, what did you say?
I recall telling him that I was upset with the situation that
Tell
God
the
did.
jury what you said to him.
I told my probationer that I was upset with the sergeant, that goddamn sergeant should have handled this a lot different. He should have handled it a lot better, and that the officers should have their asses reamed.
Brasino sounds like a witness for the prosecution. But on cross-examination, Prosecutor Terry White must walk a thin line. If he's too tough, he will discredit Brasino. But if he's too easy, it might appear as if the prosecutors charged Brasino merely to get him to turn against his fellow officers.
While Mr. King was on the ground, did you see any movements that you would describe as threatening to
No,
Officer Powell?
Which time?
During the second series of baton blows.
No, sir.
Did you see any movements by Mr. King that could be defined as aggressive?
No, sir.
Did you see any moves by Mr. King that could be defined as combative?
No, sir.
Now, eventually, you put your hand on the baton of Officer Powell, is that correct?
Yes.
And you pointed out that movement in the video earlier for your counsel, is that correct?
Yes.
Now, when you made that movement, why did you do that?
I wanted him to stop, Officer Powell to stop.
You wanted him to stop what?
Striking Mr. King.
Why did you want him to stop striking Mr. King?
Because I thought enough, Mr. King, I didn't know what Officer Powell viewed, but what I saw was I just thought there was enough force being used.
Would you say it was a unusual move on your part to step in and grab the baton of another officer?
Yes.
You've never had to do that before, have you?
No.
You've never had to try to stop one of your fellow officers who was out of control, have you?
No.
Right. But from the situation that you observed at that point in time, that was a drastic step that you needed to take, wasn't it?
Yes.
It was a drastic step because Officer Powell, in your mind, was going to continue to beat Mr. King. Isn't that correct?
Yes.
Okay. You didn't know how to stop this, did you?
No.
You tried to say something to the officers, but that didn't do any good, did it?
No.
It just appeared to you that they were out of control.
Yes.
And in your mind, you were trying to figure out, what can I do? Is that correct?
Yes.
What can I do to stop this?
Yes.
All right. So you went over and you stomped Mr. King, isn't that correct?
No.
All right. At the time that you went over and placed your foot on Mr. King's neck and shoulder area, Mr. King was moving his hands behind his back, wasn't he?
I just saw his left arm.
Well, his left arm was moving in the direction behind his back, wasn't it?
It was moving. I didn't recall what direction that night.
And there were no baton strokes at that time, was there? That you went in and put your foot on Mr. King's neck and shoulder area?
No.
By the end of Brasino's testimony, the jury is left with a mixed impression. Is Theodore Brasino a man who tried to protect Rodney King? Or is he a man who will say anything in his own defense? The defense has rested its case, and the time has come for Prosecutor Terry White to offer a rebuttal. It's a tall order. White must counter the testimony of Sergeant Duke and Captain Michael, who testified that the defendant's actions were within the guidelines of the LAPD. For that, the prosecution calls the highest-ranking officer to date, Commander Michael Bostic, now head of the LAPD's Use of Force Review Board.
Now, Commander Bostic, are you familiar with the escalation, de-escalation concept?
Yes, sir, I am.
And what is that concept?
That was a concept that I developed when I was writing the training bulletin back in 1977. And the basic concept of escalation and de-escalation of force was a way of explaining to police officers during the training phase, and also to make it much easier to remember where policy fits. It's a way of looking at the department's policy itself, which basically states that force has to be reasonable and necessary.
When is an officer supposed to escalate or go up to different levels? When is that suggested by the policy?
Your Honor, I can only do that with a pretty lengthy explanation.
Well, is that what you want, Mr. Rodney? Want to ask? Well, it saves my voice, Your Honor. You can go ahead.
Okay, the theory of escalation, de-escalation is a way of describing to police officers their responsibility for the minimum level of force possible to take an arrestee into custody or to prevent any type of aggressive action by suspects in a situation. The theory basically states that an officer's use of force must be in direct response to some action by the suspect, and it must be a reasonable reaction to that, again with the idea in mind of using the minimum possible force available to an officer, and at the same time prevent injury to the suspect and to the officers.
Commander Bostic, you said you had an opportunity to review the videotape in this case?
Yes, sir, I have.
Borrowing a tactic from the defense, Prosecutor White asks Bostic to dissect the tape.
Stop. Back up about 2 or 3 frames. A little bit more. Right here.
Commander Bostic identifies for the prosecutor the exact frame when he thinks the defendants crossed the line.
Is this the point at which you believe the force used against Mr. King becomes unreasonable and unnecessary?
Yes, from this point forward, based upon my understanding and my viewing of this videotape and my viewing of the police reports, the sergeant's logs, and the singer's statements, I believe from this point forward it's outside the policy of the Los Angeles Police Department.
Objection overruled.
All right.
The answer will stand.
And is it your testimony then, at any point after 3:42:20, any baton blow received by Mr. King is unreasonable and unnecessary?
Yes, sir, it is.
And is it your testimony that after 3:42:20, any kick delivered to Mr. King is unreasonable and unnecessary?
Yes, sir, it is.
And is it your testimony that after 3:42:20, any stomp delivered to Mr. King is unreasonable and unnecessary?
Yes, sir, it is.
Is it your testimony that any force being delivered to or at Mr. King at this point forward becomes unreasonable and unnecessary?
Yes, sir, it is.
John Barnett questions Bostic's experience on the street.
In all your career, you never saw a circumstance in which you felt that excessive force was used. Is that correct?
That's correct.
So you never had the occasion to make a decision regarding intervention. Isn't that correct?
That's correct.
You've never, ever been in the field in a serious use of force case where you had to make that decision, correct?
Which decision is that?
Whether to intervene or not.
Yes, that's correct.
And your experience is totally lacking in that regard. Isn't that correct?
No, that's incorrect.
Well, you've never had to make that decision yourself, correct?
No, but I've watched other people do it.
Well, you've
In the
never
field.
had... Pardon me?
In the field, I've watched other people intervene.
Well, you didn't feel it was necessary to intervene?
Yes, but other people did it before
Oh,
me.
I see. Now you're saying that you saw it, but you didn't have to because somebody else did?
That's correct.
Then defense attorney Stone tries to discredit Bostic by implying he's a puppet for LAPD Chief Darrell Gates.
Are you really an objective witness here in this jury, before this jury, in terms of rendering your own independent opinion about this incident?
Absolutely. As a matter of fact, no other staff officer of this organization has had any contact with me while I've made my opinions and developed my opinions, and I am literally here on my own, forming my own opinion.
All right. Did you hear the chief of police describe this incident, the King incident of March 3rd, 1991, publicly as an aberration?
Yes, I did.
All right. And it's your testimony that you're not influenced by the chief's description of this incident as an aberration?
That's correct. I make my own independent judgments and evaluations because that's my role and responsibility in the organization.
Commander Bostic is the only use of force expert that prosecutors managed to present. They attempt but fail to force another expert currently on the LAPD to testify against the officers. The trial is nearing its conclusion.
All right, Mr. White, you may proceed.
Thank you.
Terry White then turns his attention to closing arguments, his last chance to make his case to the jury to convince them that the defendants broke the law.
You are the impartial judges of the facts in this case. Just as the judge is the judge of the law, you are the judges of the facts. And as judges, you should remain impartial and not be an advocate for one side or the other. It is your job to call the evidence as you see it. to decide this case on the evidence and let the chips fall where they may, no matter where they may fall. This videotape is the central piece of evidence in this case. We don't need to rely on Stacy Coon's words. We don't need to rely on Lawrence Powell's words. We don't need to rely on what they say happened that night. We don't need to rely on what Mr. King says happened that night. We have the videotape, and the videotape shows conclusively what occurred that night. And it's something that can't be rebutted. It's there for everyone to see. It's the most objective piece of evidence you can have. And you have to determine what a reasonable person acting as a police officer would have done in this particular situation. So it is objective. Not only do we find out or determine what the officer was thinking, but then you have to determine, as the trier of fact, was the officer's actions objectively reasonable. On that videotape, you see unnecessary brutality by Officer Powell. Unnecessary, excessive, unreasonable brutality by Officer Powell. From the first moment that videotape begins until Mr. King is handcuffed, Officer Powell is relentless in his baton blows to Mr. King. Relentless, even though there's points and times where Mr. King is on the ground, not doing anything, but Officer Powell continues. Now, moving on to Sergeant Coon. Earlier, we briefly talked about aiding and abetting. And an aider and abettor is just as liable for the crime as someone who directly and actively commits the act. This is a man, the sergeant at the scene, who took charge of this situation from the beginning. From the moment that he stepped out of his car, he was in charge of the situation. He ordered Melanie Singer back. He said, "Stay back, we'll handle this." He ordered the use of force. And by that I mean he ordered the first use of force. He ordered the first swarm in this particular instance. He ordered his officers to swarm, or team tackle, or gang tackle, or however you want to call it. I believe in his report he said swarm. Mr. King, he ordered the officers to go in and swarm. He also ordered the officers to go to get off, that he was going to use the taser. Then he used the taser. He personally operated that taser. He personally used that use of force. Then the batons. He personally directed his officers where to strike in the use of those batons. If you look at the tape and you determine at some point that a reasonable force has begun and Officer Wynn strikes Mr. King after that point, Officer Wynn kicks Mr. King after that point, he's just as guilty as any of the other defendants. Officer Brasino is being charged with only one, is being charged in counts 1 and 2 based on one stomp. That's all he's being charged. That's his entire extent of his conduct that we're charging him as far as a violation of the law. He's not being charged as an aider and abettor of anyone. He's not being charged as being responsible or being held responsible for anything that Officer Powell did or Officer Wynn did or Sergeant Coon. He's being charged based upon this one stomp that we're going to show. And I think the thing that's important here, the thing you have to look at is, at the point in time where Officer Brasino delivers this stomp to Mr. King, what is Mr. King doing at that point in time? We want you to look at this entire video. We want you to do what the defense doesn't want you to do. They don't want you to look at this entire video. Commander Bostic was on the stand, the people's expert, the people's use of force expert. Did they ask him one question about this video? No, they didn't. Did they show this entire video to their defense experts? No, they didn't. They don't want you to look at this entire video. And according to Sergeant Duke, everything Mr. King did was aggressive. We went through this video on cross-examination. Every point, aggressive, aggressive, aggressive. They can continue to use the baton. This man is on the ground. Mr. King is on the ground, and he's aggressive. Sergeant Duke says, look, his leg is cocked. What is this? What's cocked? His leg is bent. But the language, if they say cocked, it makes it sound more aggressive. His leg is bent. His foot's not flat. This is aggressive. What could this man do not to be aggressive? Did he have to be unconscious? As I read somewhere, someone said, what did he have to do? Did he have to melt into the pavement? Did he have to melt into the cracks of the pavement for him not to be aggressive? And at some point, you have to look at that video and say, enough is enough. Stop. Go in there, handcuff him. Stop this. This is not right. But they continue to hit him. I issue a challenge to Mr. Stone, to Mr. DePasquale, to Mr. Munger, to play this videotape for you and to point out things in this tape that justify the continued use of the baton. I don't think they'll do it. I think they're going to get their little frames out. They're going to show you 323.14. They're going to show you 324.27. They're going to show you a frame here. They're going to show you a frame there. They're not going to show you the entire videotape. They probably won't even play the entire videotape for you because they're afraid of the videotape. They're afraid because they know what that videotape shows. Now, who are you going to believe? The defendants or your own eyes? Thank you.
Coming up, the attorneys for the defense get their last chance to make their case.
If the jury decides this was excessive force, they're going to decide it based on what they see and what they hear regarding those 81 seconds. They're not going to they're not going to resolve their doubt by turning to your police report. They're not going to resolve their doubt by returning to things that happened prior to the event. They're going to have to decide the case based on that 81 seconds and what happened there. So that's where our argument's going to focus in closing.
The long trial is nearing its end. Michael Stone is talking strategy with his client, Lawrence Powell. Both know that the approaching moment is an important one.
There were many opportunities, I suppose, for Officer Powell to avoid the risk and the threat to his own personal safety that was occasioned by the incident that these officers confronted that night. But he determined to stand his ground. He determined to take the necessary steps to do his duty. And as a result of those choices that he made that night on March 3rd, 1991, early in the morning, he's sitting here as a defendant before this jury. It's not Rodney Glenn King who's sitting here. It's Officer Lawrence Powell, Sergeant Stacy Kuhn, Officer Ted Briseno, and Officer Tim Wind. What do we, ladies and gentlemen, as members of the community, expect from our police? What is it that we want them to do? These officers, these defendants, do not get paid to lose street fights. They don't get paid to roll around in the dirt with the likes of Rodney Glenn King. These are not RoboCops, ladies and gentlemen. They hurt, they feel pain, they bleed, and they die, just like everyone else. And we leave it to them to take care of the mean streets so that we can safely enjoy our lives. I decline the challenge to play the video again. You can play the video all you want. Backwards, forwards, slow motion. It'll be available for you as a piece of evidence. I've seen it enough, and I think you have too.
This incident unfolded about 90 days after Tim Wind hit the street as a probationary police officer for the city of Los Angeles. No, that does not deny his responsibility for his own actions, but yes, indeed, I suggest you must keep that in mind. You must consider that.
Defense attorney Paul DePasquale has gambled on a low-profile strategy for his client. Timothy Wind was the only defendant who did not take the stand. DePasquale accepts the prosecution's challenge to play the video. He asks the jurors to watch the tape in slow motion, focusing on Wind only. He argues that every blow, each checked swing, is a direct response to Rodney King.
Mr. King is still moving far higher than a push-up position. Coming around, his head comes around. You see Tim Wind appear to start a swing, and as Mr. King's head is coming into that area of swing, watch Tim Wind check swing, just like in baseball. Check swing to not hit Mr. King in the head.
In his closing argument, John Barnett focuses on the two key acts Officer Ted Brasenio is seen doing on the tape.
The prosecutor, Mr. White, stood before you and told you what Officer Brasenio did was unreasonable, that what Officer Brasenio did was not only wrong, but that it rose to a criminal offense. You got to get into Officer Brasenio's shoes at 12:45 and judge his actions from that perspective. What did he do? What act did he commit to get here? More importantly, what was he trying to do? He was trying to put his foot in the back shoulder area of Mr. King so that he could control Mr. King, so that he could stop the beating. That's what he tried to do. Whether he hit the shoulder or the base of the neck, that really doesn't matter. You're to determine what was in his head, what was in Officer Brasenio's heart, what was in his soul when he did that.
Next, Barnett focuses on what he portrays as an act of courage on the part of his client.
Of all the police officers at the scene, one officer steps forward and tries to stop his fellow officers. And that policeman sits there, and it's Officer Theodore Brasenio. He is the only one who tried to stop this beating. It's kind of ironic, isn't it? Ted Brasenio seeks to intercede on behalf of Mr. King, and his reward is an indictment.
The final argument is made by the attorney for Sergeant Stacy Coon, Darrell Munger.
And I propose to you that Sergeant Coon's truth was the same on that night as it was when he testified. That he told you the best he could, that he took accountability for his officers, and he said, I am responsible for my officers. And I ordered that to prevent something else. Sergeant Coon is not a criminal and should not be charged criminally in this case.
While Munger has the last word for the defense, Prosecutor Terry White gets the last word in the trial. In his second chance to sum up the case for the jury, White focuses on Officer Powell with a vengeance.
Why is it every time, every piece of evidence regarding Lawrence Powell that's bad, it's somebody else's fault? It's Terry White's fault. It's Alan Yochelsen's fault. It's Ted Brasenio's fault. It's Lawrence Davis' fault. It's never this man's fault. Why not? This is the man, and look at him. This man laughed. This man taunted.
All right, Mr. White, get back to the podium, please, and confine your argument to the podium.
I'm sorry, Your Honor. This man laughed. This man taunted, and he's denying it. He's denying it. How many times did we play that tape in here, and was that not laughter? Was that not chuckling? Was that not giggling? Well, what was funny out there? Desperate men do desperate things, and these three defendants have been doing desperate things for the last 6 weeks. You don't need to be an expert to look at that video and say that is wrong, that is bad, that is criminal.
Closing arguments are now complete. Next, the judge will instruct the jury about how to apply the law to this case. While waiting for that next step, Court TV broadcast a special program that featured a panel of expert lawyers who had served as commentators during Court TV's live televising of the trial. Here are some excerpts from that 90-minute program anchored by Cynthia McFadden.
As a prosecutor, let me start with you. What did you think of the defense strategy in this case, absent Officer Brasenio?
Well, I think they did the best job that they could looking at a live video. What they tried to say to the jury was essentially, don't just look at the video, you have to understand what the officers were thinking. They were afraid, more was going on than you can just see. Don't look at the video. It was the best they could do, but I don't know if it's going to work with the jury to ignore what they saw.
What about as a defense lawyer, what do you think?
I think without Brasenio in the tape, it's a winning strategy in Simi Valley because certainly the category of defendants most likely to be the beneficiaries of nullification, in which the jury ignores the law and maybe the facts, are police officers. Briseno made it hard because Briseno attacked the others and said, we really did, there was excessive force used there. That coupled with the tape made it hard, but it was an arrogant defense, but one that had a decent shot of winning.
Well, the defense had also seemed to me tried to take it away from the videotape in the sense that they said, listen, the beginning of this videotape you can't see. Let's talk about head blows, they essentially said, and there were no head blows, and therefore it wasn't excessive force. I thought it was an interesting strategy, Bert.
Yeah, well, I think they did, I agree, I think they did just about the best they could do, and they did a pretty good job in I think, blunting the early part of the tape. I mean, I think they may have established a defense for a couple of whacks. I mean, I think they may have, a reasonable person could look at that and say, well, they were frightened, he was moving, hit him a couple of times, that's okay. What I think
Some force.
Some force. What I think they didn't do, and it's not their fault, I don't think they could have done, is they couldn't deal with Briseno. He's a devastating piece of evidence, and they couldn't deal with the last 40 seconds of the tape. It's the last 40 seconds of the tape that is really the damning evidence. And the DA kept pounding at that. He kept saying, look, they may have been okay at the beginning, but at the end, who could possibly justify it?
Well,
We also keep talking about them. You got to remember, with respect to Wind, if you think about it, you don't even know what Wind's defense is. And that's a really tough posture to sit, not take the stand when all the other defendants do under that
Well, is
pressure.
it tough or is it clever? I mean, is it a good idea to try to distance
It's
yourself?
clever to hide, but you see him on the videotape, and he has some things to explain. And while he isn't Powell, he isn't Kuhn either. And it seems to me that there's no defense that one can articulate that he's put forth.
Remember when Duke testified for the defense? The sergeant who trains people in the academy in terms of use of force took him through the tape blow by blow. Remember that? And said every single blow was justified.
Yeah.
That was the most powerful defense witness, the most powerful testimony imaginable. Right?
Yeah.
In terms of just producing a reasonable doubt. And then Bostic, who's dependent for his job on the goodwill of the new commissioner, comes in and says the opposite.
Sergeant Duke, welcome. You're standing by live in California. You've been with the LAPD for 22 years. You've trained officers. Of course, you just heard Eddie Hayes give you a high compliment, thought that you were one of the riveting moments in this proceeding. And you received many compliments today, in fact, from the defense lawyers as they summed up. The judge tomorrow is going to instruct this jury that they don't have to be an expert in order to decide what's excessive force. Do you think that's true?
I think what you have to do is you have to take the videotape and look at the job of what we've tried to get the jury to understand the duties of a police officer encompass, and then attach that philosophy to what you see trying to take Mr. King into custody.
But you know, most people who see that videotape, and now the jury's had the opportunity to see it many times, but certainly initially when most people see it, they say it looks like those cops were out of control.
I can't agree with that at all. The reason why I say that is, first of all, you only have 2 officers that are engaged in the use of force incident. They are striking at the legs, the elbows, the hip area. You see them pulsate. You see them evaluating what is occurring. And they're moving in, they're evaluating, they're moving out. And Mr. King continually tries to get himself in a position to get up. And the officers don't have to put themselves in a position to be attacked. All kinds of things bad can happen when Mr. King gets up on his feet. They stop when Mr. King says, I've had enough, I give up. It stops. And this is not an aberration, as some people have said. It is something that occurs in law enforcement all too often. And you're dealing with ex-cons, felons, people that rob, steal, rape, mug, burglarize, and they don't want to go to jail. They don't want to become put into custody, so officers have to use force. This got put into a rather graphic illustration because it got videotaped.
Sergeant Duke, let me interrupt you for just a second. If you had believed that these officers had struck Rodney King in the head, would that have been excessive force?
Intentionally striking in the head would have been excessive force. That is, the intent to aim and strike at the head is excessive force.
Well, do you think there can be a difference of opinion on what's excessive and what's not? I mean, Commander Bostic came into court and said this wasn't excessive. How do you explain that?
Well, Commander Bostic is a use of force expert by appointment only. If you checked his background and credentials, you'll find that out of 17 years, he has 19 years of experience. He has 3 years in the field and very limited experience at that. And I think just by his statements that that officer safety and suspect safety is always at the same level is not true. And the thing where he says that patrol is routine, the verbiage there is that routine kills police officers, that there's nothing routine about patrol, and that when you allow patrol to get into a routine mode, that's when you get hurt. Commander Bostic is in a position which makes him the chairman of the Use of Force Review Board, irregardless of what his background. He could be out of that job tomorrow doing something else at the whim of the chief.
Sergeant Duke, it was tough for the prosecution to come up with Commander Bostic as an expert, use of force expert. 4 others backed down. Was that because there was lots of pressure on these officers not to testify at this trial?
No, they had outside people that wanted to testify. In fact, Mr. Ron McCarthy, who agreed to testify and then decided not to testify based on a review of the facts and getting a clear-cut background of the whole incident. The DA, I don't think, provided them with all the facts. And once you see the facts, then everything comes into focus. The first time I reviewed this tape without all the facts prior to that, I went, you know, something doesn't look right here. But you get all the facts and you understand the nightmare confrontation with a PCP suspect, and it all comes into focus. And you understand the dynamics that took place. PCP is a frightening, scary, freaky confrontation.
Sergeant Charles Duke, thank you very much for your contribution to this review tonight. Back here in our studio in New York, I detect some dissatisfaction with what Charles Duke was saying. Would you like to start, Ray?
Well, 2 things. The first is that what Duke seemed to do ultimately at the end was to answer your question and say, unmassaged, this is a pretty tough videotape to look at. But the second is, it seems to me both Duke and Bostic are less important as experts than they are as partisans. Duke is demonstrating solidarity to the jury with the defendant, saying, look, rank-and-file cops think these guys did the right thing. And Bostic is saying, as a matter of policy, this department can't tolerate this. And juries are surprisingly sophisticated, and I think we'll see the partisanship, especially since their area of expertise is something for which they can substitute their own judgment with the tape and with the charge.
Back in the courtroom, the judge reads to the jury its instructions.
You have heard all the evidence and the arguments of the attorneys, and now it is my duty to instruct you on the law that applies to this case.
In the jury instructions, Judge Stanley Weisberg informs the jury about the decisions they must make and how they must make them. These instructions will prove critical to how this jury ultimately decides to view the case.
In rendering an opinion as to the use of force in this case, one or more expert witnesses expressed an opinion on what physical acts are shown on Exhibit 2, the so-called holiday videotape. Such experts have no more skill than a layperson in viewing the videotape and determining what it shows in this regard. To the extent that you find that the videotape is important to you in your deliberations and decision in this case, you are the sole judges of what physical acts are shown on the tape.
The ultimate question for the jury is whether the force used by the defendants against Rodney King was reasonable.
A peace officer who is making an arrest may use reasonable force to make such arrest or to prevent escape or to overcome resistance. When that force would no longer appear to a reasonable peace officer in the same or similar circumstances to be necessary, the right to use reasonable force no longer exists, and the use of such force is not reasonable. The people have the burden to prove that the force used was not lawful and without lawful necessity. If you have a reasonable doubt that the use of force was unlawful and without lawful necessity, you must find the defendant not guilty.
So the jury must put itself in the shoes of a reasonable police officer and decide if the defendant's actions were warranted.
You shall now retire and select one of your number to act as foreman or foreperson.
35 days of testimony, 54 witnesses. The video played scores of times in real time, slow motion, frame by frame. Finally, the jurors leave to deliberate.
Yeah, I'm not going to try to be a tough guy on this one. This has been very physically draining. And, you know, these are 12, 13, 14-hour days. And when you consider the 8-hour days in court, which are not easy, and then you got to come back here and work, 3-4 hours and then 2 hours in the morning, this has not been easy at all. And then we work on Saturdays. It's 10-hour days on Saturday and Sundays. So this has not been easy at all.
She's got it.
Then the waiting. First hours, then days.
7 days later,
You know more than I do.
the jury returns. The defendants take their places back in the courtroom.
the jury has reached a verdict on all counts except one.
We, the jury, in the above entitled action, find the defendant, Lawrence M. Powell, not guilty, find the defendant, Timothy E. Wind, not guilty, find the defendant, Theodore J. Brasino, not guilty, find the defendant, Stacy C. Kuhn, not guilty. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, are these your verdicts? So say you one, so say you all.
Yes.
The defendants are acquitted on all counts, with the exception of defendant Lawrence Powell. The jury could not decide whether Powell was guilty of the second charge, excessive force by a police officer.
In South Central Los Angeles and in cities across the country, people took to the streets.
But jurors interviewed after the trial said that there was much more to the case than the videotape. They pointed to other facts that supported the defense. They agreed with the four officers that Rodney King was perceived to be dangerous, thus justifying the use of force. And they agreed with the defense that the prosecution did not prove beyond a reasonable doubt that the officers broke the law. Of all the voices in the aftermath of the verdict, Rodney King stood out as a voice of reason.
People, I just want to say, you know, can we all get along? Can we get along? It's not going to change anything. We'll get our justice. They've won the battle, but they haven't won the war.
What you've seen is a 2-hour summary of a trial that spanned over 8 weeks with more than 150 hours of testimony. And one thing was clear. This case was far more complicated than the snippets of videotape seen on the news would ever suggest. For Court TV, I'm Fred Grant.